Hey guys, Blaziken Blitz here, welcoming you back to a draft video. So, as you can see, I've got the previous two drafts up here from the last draft video I did, mainly because I did not record a single one of those battles. I might get to that at some point. The WWCL I can't get to because it's an on-cart league and I don't have a capture card to be able to do so. So I will just spoil the results I had. If you want, you can skip later into the video until the next picture shows up because I have another scene. And then you'll be able to skip all the spoilers in case I actually do record the videos. But for now, I guess I will show you. In the WWCL, since I first can't record those, you can check out the WWCL channel, which has a lot of the battles, but it doesn't have everything. There were recording issues going on with the league, so yeah. In that league, I went 11-4, which ended up being good enough for the third seed in the entire league, a 16-man league, and that got me into playoffs, where I lost round 1. I might record that video later because it was done on Showdown, but yeah, I was very disappointed because a lot of my leagues already I've lost in round 1 of the playoffs, and it's really discouraging when it happens because when it does happen, you get so far and it just comes and you just fall flat on your face. And then in the WBC, which I could be recording, I went 5-4. In a 10-man league, 5-4 is kind of meh. I barely missed the playoffs by losing my last week. And that really, really sucked in the span of things because this is the first time I've been in a league for a full season and I've missed the playoffs. And that really bugs me because I like being in playoffs. It shows that I'm a good player, you know, and sometimes I don't have that sort of luxury. But as you can see, yeah, I did miss the playoffs in that league. So, these are the results of the 2 leagues from my last draft video. Obviously, I'm going to be trying to improve on those. I've already done a couple of battles from these leagues, and I've already done a couple of free agency transactions. Those will be addressed, but the original mons will not be shown. But yeah. So we're going to start in the WBC because at this point I'm like, okay, well, this is another short league. I'm going to try to improve drastically because 5-4 is not good enough for me. 5-4 is just barely a winning record, and I want a playoff record. I really do. So what I start with is franchising Celesteela. Celesteela actually did really well for me in the WBC the first time, that second season, and specifically because there's so much it can do. It can be bulky, it can be choice banded, it can be choice specs, it can run auto-tamize, or however that's spelled. It's not supposed to be that way. It can be assault vested. It could do anything. And realistically, that's the best part about it. Its stats are so balanced and its move pool is so wide that it allows me to have something that can do a lot of different things for my squad. And I have a tendency to do really well with offensive steel types. So Celesteela just seemed like the natural choice to franchise, and I didn't think that I would need a whole lot of free agency transactions, especially because we were doing a slow draft. And in slow drafts, my drafts tend to work out a little bit better. And I believe this was definitely the case this time around as well. So the first round, at this point I already had a steel type, so I kind of wanted to try and look for a good dragon type. There were plenty of them still on the board. I believe Dragonite was still on the board at the time, and it would have been a good pick. I believe Salamence was also on the board at the time, but the thing that I was trying to avoid was having too many flying types that didn't often use flying type moves, because I only had a limited amount of Z users. We have 3 in our WBC league, and I wanted, if I was going to have another flying type, I wanted a flying type that could use flying type moves without trying to use a Z crystal. And so I decided to go with a dragon type that I don't normally go for, but I thought would be really fun for the occasion. and that one is Kyurem Black. Now, Kyurem Black, as I'm sure a lot of you people know if you watch this, is a wall-breaking god. He has a wide move pool, bolt beam coverage. He's a dragon type with ground coverage, base 170 attack and base 120 special attack, along with base 95 speed, and a decent amount of bulk that allows its stats to be really versatile. It can be a bulky set, even though its defensive typing is not great. Specs, Scarf, Vested, Type Resist Berry. There's a lot. Again, there's a lot of things it can do, and that's what I found is great for me in draft formats. Is mons that have a specialized purpose but don't have to follow that specialized purpose. And as a result, this mon is what I was looking for, and it's the third of my Dragon Fairy Steel Core, which is really useful for any team that wants to actually be serious. It also allows for me to have a good Scarfer, which also allows for me to have some upfront speed that Celesteela wouldn't have unless it wouldn't have in general, because I have to use Auto Demise to actually double my speed beforehand. So this is potential non-setup speed. It's a water resist, it's a grass resist, it's a fire neutrality, and overall it was just a very nice mon to add along with Celesteela for both offensive and defensive synergy. That's the word. Anyway, so at that point, I'm just like, okay, well, I want a fairy type. And I believe I was going late in the first round, so I got another mon pretty quickly after Kyurem Black, because the snake format allowed it to go right back to me. And so somehow, I managed to get Tapu Fini again. And I'm sitting there just like, oh my goodness, Tapu Fini helped me with 11-4 season over the WWCL. And that just made me so happy that I was able to complete my Dragon Steel Fairy Core and get a bulky water and get a defogger all at the same time. And it was just the perfect glue mon, as I like Tapu Fini to be. It is an excellent glue mon for a lot of teams, especially when I want something that can take a hit or two so that I can run offense. Tapu Fini has worked really well for me. It also allows me to have a Fairy Stab. And Fairy Stab is really nice because it only has 2 resists. And most of those are actually hit by water coverage really nicely. So it can run an effective Calm Mindset, although it doesn't have to. Because most of the time, I'll be running a defensive set. And a lot of the time, I'll be running Defog because it is so useful to have another Defogger. That said, it's not my only hazard remover, because that would be silly, but it's very helpful. Very, very helpful. And moves like Nature's Madness, Taunt, Haze, those are moves that I really, really need. And so, it's very, very useful in general. So my OU draft, I thought, came out really well. And so my UU draft, I wanted to continue the trend, and my first thought was, hey, I'll draft, I believe it was Azelf as my first round UU pick, because it has speed, it has stealth rocks, it has nasty plot. There's a lot of things it can do, and it just really would have helped me out. But then it got sniped very shortly before I could get it. And so my plan B was to grab Celebi. Now, I kind of consider this to be a blessing in disguise, because Celebi, while it doesn't have the same sort of speed, it allows me, because of our rules, we have the old baton pass rules, where you can't baton pass speed and another stat, and you can only have one baton passer on your team at one time. So Celebi, in return, gives me pretty much one of the best baton passers I could ever have for my team, while also being really versatile, and without me spending a high OU draft pick on Mew. Celebi in particular, Grass Psychic is a terrible defensive typing, but it allows me to have an electric resist, which I had one in Kyurem Black before, but the problem with Kyurem Black as an electric resist is that it's weak to fighting. And so Celebi kind of allows me to have a secondary electric resist, and I really like being able to have that, as well as yet another water resist, because water resists are actually kind of important sometimes. But mostly Celebi is able to use Swords Dance, it's able to use Nasty Plot, Stealth Rocks, Thunder Wave, it has Recovery, it has a wide special move pool, it has a decent physical move pool. It's just really versatile, and it allows me to have a grass type. And Celebi is just a real asset to a team as a whole, and I really appreciated being able to get it. So my second UU pick was kind of a toss-up, because I already had a third UU pick in mind, specifically a Mega. And Megas, and we only allow one Mega per team, and I had a Mega in mind, but I knew it wouldn't be picked before the third pick in UU, so I wanted to try and get something that was valuable for the second pick. I wasn't sure what to pick because a lot of things that were valuable were taken before I got the opportunity, and everything else that was valuable pretty much did nothing for my team. So I decided to pick something up so that I wouldn't have to pick up another typing later in the draft, and it still turns out to be a valuable Pokemon in Mienshao. Now, Mienshao is one of those draft picks that I always feel iffy about because it's got a weird speed tier, and it's very frail. But in general, it's not a bad pick. It's a fighting type, which otherwise I would have had to try and spend one of my RU or NU picks on, which at that point I knew most of what I wanted in RU and NU, and it wouldn't have been a good scenario to try to fit it in. But it allowed me to get a fighting type with a decent special attack stat to lure with hidden powers, and it gave me a Scarfer. A base 105 Scarfer is really helpful because there's stuff like Dragon Dancers that are base 100, and you can just straight up revenge it with Mienshao. Not to mention, Mienshao's physical attack and Reckless just make it really hit hard with High Jump Kick, and it has knockoff to deal with the ghosts. So that's always very helpful. Very, very, very helpful. As a whole, I really liked, now that I've gone over my draft, I've seen my entire draft and I've seen Mienshao's place in it, I really like Mienshao's place in it. And in general, the niche that Mienshao provides to my team is a mon that is over base 100, which at the current time I didn't have. So it's a very useful mon. It provides a fast wall breaker, and it's not like it's a bad mon. I think it was really a good choice for the situation. And so I mentioned that I had a Mega in mind for my third pick, and it didn't get sniped, which was really nice. So as a whole, I really wanted this mon because it filled a lot of niches for my team. Well, let's just get right into it. It's Mega Houndoom. So Mega Houndoom is a really interesting mon in the fact that it's over base 115 in terms of speed. Its special attack is quite nice. It has boosting options in both Nasty Plot and Sunny Day. But most importantly, it's not only a ghost resist, it also fulfills my Grass Water Fire core. And that's huge because Grass Water Fire is one of the most basic cores in drafting. And in general, it's a really nice mon to round out my UU draft. My UU draft doesn't look very threat heavy, definitely not as much as my OU draft did, but Mega Houndoom is, while it's not very versatile, it can do what I need it to do. It can run Hidden Powers, Solar Beam, Dark Pulse, Fire Blast, Sludge Bomb. It's a good mon, and I really appreciate what it does for my squad. I like having mons that are over base 110 speed, because if you don't have one, usually anyone that does have one will start to give you some massive trouble. And so being able to have one in general, especially on a team that on face value at the moment has no priority. I think Mienshao has Fake Out, but it's Fake Out. And I could use Fake Out on Mienshao. I wouldn't put it past me. But in general, there's no priority on the squad, so it's a fairly slow squad. And Mega Houndoom kind of fulfills both of those needs by providing Sucker Punch if for some reason I need it. And a Mon that is fast. And with the Mega buff, I don't have to worry about that first turn because it's automatically 115 speed as soon as I bring in base Houndoom. And when I bring in base Houndoom, there's a lot of mons that it just forces out, allowing me to Sunny Day or Nasty Plot at will. And then things die. Things really, really die, because this thing is a monster under Sun or at +2. It just does so much damage, and I love it. I love it, I love it, I love it. So, one thing that I noticed going into RU was that I lacked a ground type. And so, because I passed on a Dragon Dancer going with my OU Dragon, I decided to get another Dragon in Flygon. Now, Flygon with his Dragon Dance buff is actually really good. Like from its stats, base 100 attack does not look very impressive, but I mean that's also the same base attack as Zygarde and the same typing as Zygarde, but 2 tiers lower. And it also has some versatility too, like it has Roost, it has Defog. It could be a bulky Defogger, it could be a Choice Band, Choice Scarf. It can run Dragon Dance with Life Orb, it can run Dragon Dance Expert Belt with whatever really. It's not my Z user, so I can't use Z Flygon, but that really doesn't matter in the scheme of things because it's powerful enough at +1 that it really rips through things pretty quickly. Especially because its move pool is actually a lot better than it realistically should be. Like, I think it gets Fire Punch, and with those arms, I'm surprised that it could. But you know what? I am definitely not complaining considering. Flygon it gives me another hazard remover in an emergency, which is like also really important. Because having multiple hazard removers, especially, having 2 hazard removers is really good for a squad. And it allows me to just kind of not have to bring Finny if I need to defog. It allows me to just be like, hey, I can run this or I can run this. And having versatility in a league format is huge. Because it also allows to be unpredictable. And unpredictability is great in league format, because if you're predictable, an opponent can prepare easily for you, and that's exactly what you want to avoid. So next, I grab something that is a little bit more predictable, but still not quite predictable. And for the second pick in RU, I thought it was massive value, and I decided to grab Snorlax again. Now, I think I went over in my last WBC draft video why I like Snorlax. But if I didn't, its Curse Lax is just really, really hard to break. And Choice Band Lax is not bad either. Particularly, it's a good attacker and it's got some good bulk. It's slow, but it also is a normal type. It has a wide move pool, and in general, it's just another good glue mon. You know, it's a value mon for RU, and it allows me to just kind of, like, my second RU pick was also kind of up in the air, and Snorlax gave me this value that nothing else would have. I didn't have a normal type up to this point, which it provided. Like I said, it's got a wide move pool. Curse Lax is really hard to break. Choice Band Lax hits actually pretty hard. But yeah, it's another one of those mons that can tank hits pretty easily, and that is really helpful. But in general, it was more of a value pick than anything else, but it's not something I would rather give up because it's actually really useful. And then my third RU pick, I didn't have much of an idea, and there was like little to nothing else in RU that I actually wanted. So I decided to pick my first NU pick early, which allowed me to get another NU pick later. One might say that there's not enough value in doing so. However, I believe that this was the right choice all the way. And I drafted Cofagrigus. Cofagrigus. I don't know how to pronounce it. I call it Cofagrigus. Whatever. Cofagrigus is the ghost type that I wanted. Ghost is a really hard type to switch into, and that's why I needed a dark type to be able to have a ghost switch in, or a resist at all. And Cofagrigus is one of the best offensive ghosts outside of like Gengar that you can possibly get. It gets Trick Room, Nasty Plot, Calm Mind. It looks like a defensive ghost on paper, which it can be. I can use Pain Split, Will-O-Wisp. I can have defensive Cofagrigus, and that would be just fine. But offensive Cofagrigus is also huge, because Nasty Plot with Ghostium is a really hard set to counter, and it can run that. And that's exactly what I gave it my last Z Crystal for. So now I have all three of my Z Crystals. I have Celesteela, I have Kyurem, and I have Cofagrigus. But also, I don't need to run the Z Crystal on it. I can run Spooky Plate. I can run a Type Resist Berry. I don't need to run the same Nasty Plot set every time. I can run Cofagrigus if I wanted to. It's another one of those mons that has versatility in what he wants to do. It can be a Trick Room setter for something like Snorlax if I wanted it to. It does a lot of things, and that's what I like my teams to do. I like them to be able to not be very predictable. But this selecting Cofagrigus in RU allowed me to pick my other real NU priority first in NU, and so I wouldn't have to worry about it getting sniped, which it almost still did anyway. For those who are in the league that actually witnessed the draft, they know. But basically, one person that had Tapu Koko was waiting for this pick. I was waiting for this pick. And someone was about to draft an Electric, and they drafted regular Raichu instead. So I ended up getting Alolan Raichu. The guy that had Tapu Koko didn't end up wanting to have Alolan Raichu anyway. But I really, really wanted Alolan Raichu. Specifically because it's a really great Electric type for how late in the draft it can go, because it's NU, and being able to have an Electric Psychic type. I had one Psychic type before, but it's Celebi. But not only is it an Electric type, but it also has 110 base speed, and it has Nasty Plot, Substitute, a wide move pool for something like Specs or Life Orb, and it just gives me a fast Electric type, which is a really good thing in League format to have, because ground types are pretty much the only thing a lot of squads have for fast Electrics. And having a fast Electric on my squad, especially one with such a wide move pool as Alolan Raichu, allows me to lure in and wall break a lot of things. Its stats don't suggest a wall breaker, but a lot of its coverage is actually really powerful. Stab Psychic and Stab Thunderbolt is not a stab combination to complain about, really. And it gets stuff like Surf, Hidden Powers, Focus Blast. I mean, really good coverage in general. And access to Nasty Plot means that at any point, if you give it a free turn, it could kill you, basically. And also, it allows me to take advantage of Tapu Koko, which is also very useful in terms of being able to counter-team my opponents. So after that, my NU picks basically came down to, okay, what do I need to kind of round out my team? And what I saw was that I needed an offensive water type, because Tapu Fini is a nice water type, but it's not really offensive, and so I'm just like, okay, well, I'm going to get a Shell Smasher. I originally wanted Omastar, but then Omastar went to the Rain squad on the league, and so I decided I would draft Barbaracle. Now, I've had Barbaracle in other leagues, and sometimes it's hard to set it up, but when you do, it is really powerful. It's another one of those mons that needs setup for speed, much like Flygon. At base 100 is not bad, but it still likes having the speed up, and Celesteela definitely needs to set up to get speed, and Cofagrigus kind of can, so that's useful. In general, it allows me to have another mon that can be fast, as well as a mon that like often runs Focus Sash. So it can be a Stealth Rocker, it can also be a Shell Smasher. I mean, it's not limited to Shell Smash, but most of the time it's going to be running Shell Smash just because that's the best thing it can do with its stat spread. Which is not a bad thing, considering I need that offensive water here in order to actually break through things that are like bulky, that need water coverage in order to break, or ground types in particular. I really like having Cofagrigus there in the back. I don't expect to use it much, but when I do use it, I feel like it's going to actually put in work, and I love Barbaricle's design too. I just like Barbaricle in general. Don't judge me. But for my last Pokemon, like I mentioned before, I wanted a mon that could use flying type attacks without using a Z Crystal. And so this lasted until the final round of NU, and I was eternally grateful for it. But I drafted Dodrio. Now Dodrio, as I'm sure a lot of you know, just recently got a buff that allows it to use Swords Dance and Jump Kick. Both are moves that it really, really appreciates. And so in general, it's not walled by Steel or Rock types anymore, which is huge because it can actually like be useful against all teams now. And so like I find that a lot of rosters are weak to flying type moves in general because that's one of the things rosters are hard to deal with. Like sometimes you can't draft a roster that deals with everything, and I feel like flying type weaknesses are one of the main culprits of weaknesses for a squad. I made sure to draft flying weaknesses, or flying resists, such as Celesteela, because Celesteela can take flying type moves, and if I can't take flying type moves, I'm just going to lose to flying type spammers. Luckily, I got one of the best value flying type spammers in the gen, and having access to Swords Dance means it can wall break a ton, but it can also run all-out attacking very well. It can run Band, it can run Scarf. Overall, just a very nice mon to have. And so that really concludes my WBC draft. As you can see, it has a lot of threats. It also has a lot of mons that not everyone would consider a threat, and I think that's a good combination to have. There's some repeated typings, and I also don't mind that as much as I used to, mainly because all the niches that each Pokemon has are different. Like even something like Cofagrigus and Snorlax, who have similar stat builds. Cofagrigus is a special ghost attacker, and Snorlax is a physical normal attacker. And like all of my squad has different niches, but also some overlap that I can help, and that like really helps for opponents in general. Like I don't have to run Kyurem Black as my wall breaker every week, because sometimes a roster can be wall broken by Dodrio or Alolan Raichu or Cofagrigus, and in general it provides for a squad that I really, really like. The speed control on it is a little iffy, especially because my fastest mon is base 115, and my Scarfers aren't the best. I mean, I do have some great Scarfers, but not a whole lot of them. I have Dodrio, Kyurem Black, and Mienshao, although that's probably all that I really need for Scarfers. Flygon also. Yeah, that's probably all I need for Scarfers. Speed control can be a problem sometimes depending on the squad that I'm facing. But in general, I feel like this squad in general turned out very, very well. And I was proud of my draft, but also it was a slow draft, so I wasn't entirely surprised. So, with the WBC done, we can move on to the TDL. So the TDL is not run by me. It's run by a friend of mine called Brody, and he doesn't have a banner for his league, so I used this picture. It used to be one of his profile pictures, and it ended up being the thumbnail for the league. So I decided to use it as the thumbnail for the league here as well. The TDL was a free draft. It didn't go by tier. And so a lot of the teams, there were actually a couple of meme teams that happened. And as such, some of the teams ended up being really, really borked. Like, they were broken as all heck. And I think mine got close to that point, if not to that point. I ended up getting a lot of threats. So, first of all, I got the #1 overall pick. So naturally, I went with one of the best mons in draft format, Tapu Koko. Tapu Koko has base 130 speed. It's a fast electric type. It's a fairy type. It has enough of a move pool to do a number to stuff like to a lot of its checks, such as Tangrowth. It has stuff like Brave Bird. It has Nature's Madness, Roost, Calm Mind. It's a lot of the time you know what it's going to be doing, but it's also versatile enough to keep you on your toes. And that's what I really like about Tapu Koko is it does what it needs to do well, but it also doesn't need to do the same role over and over again. And having a base 130 speed mon is huge, because that outspeeds most non-megas in the tier and non-scarfers. And as you'll find here later in the draft, I get a lot of good scarfers. So yeah. Then after a long time of me waiting for my next pick, I'm waiting for a dragon type. I wanted Salamence, but Salamence ended up going. And then I decided to draft Dragonite. Now, Dragonite is an excellent dragon type. It has versatility in that it can be bulky, it can run Band, it can run Dragon Dance, and the Dragon Dance set is super scary. However, there's only one Z user in the entirety of the draft in this league, and Dragonite is not it, because there ended up being a better one later on. But Dragonite as a whole is a really good dragon complement to Tapu Koko in that it has priority. It's a little on the bulkier side, but it can still boost its speed with Dragon Dance, and in general, it's a really hard to prep for threat, and it works out great, because I really wanted to use Dragonite at one point during the league, and this gives me the opportunity to do so, and I love it. So then, as is my priority almost every single time I draft, I wanted to finish out my Dragon Fairy Steel Core before the value started dropping on those fairies. On all of those. So I decided to draft my Mega Scizor. Now, Mega Scizor is also another mon that can take advantage of Tapu Koko's really fast nature by also being a little bit bulkier, but also a wall breaker at times. It can either be really bulky or it can actually be really powerful, and being a Mega that specializes in priority is also huge, because priority is a good thing to have when you're trying to take speed control into consideration, because priority basically ignores speed control. And I like Mega Scizor specifically because it's only weak to fire, and the fire is easy to cover with other types, even if it's hard to predict as a coverage move. As being a quad weakness is never helpful per se, but it's doable, especially if I grab multiple fire resists. So the 4th round comes along, and I'm just like, well, okay, I still want threats, and I realized that a really, really good mon just dropped right into my lap, and it was Volcarona. So I drafted Volcarona almost on a whim, because I really wanted Volcarona on the squad, and I hadn't had it since my first league ever. And I gave it my Z Crystal, because Volcarona with Z Crystals is really, really powerful. But it also left me in kind of this situation with hazard removers, in which Scizor is my only hazard remover. I mean, it's a decent hazard remover, but it's not great. And that kind of continued throughout the rest of the draft. But Volcarona, it does one thing, but it does it so well that I don't really care all that much. And my next pick, I ended up picking Gyarados. Mainly because I wanted another Dragon Dancer and I was looking for a water type specifically. However, that ended up getting free agency'd out because I didn't want too many flying types that couldn't use flying type moves. And so I decided to grab a flying type that could use flying type moves in free agency for it later, which ended up being undrafted Staraptor. Now, Staraptor is a great choice user, specifically Scarf and Band, because it hits so hard, and all of its flying, and it can just sit there and click Brave Bird, and so many things are getting hit really hard. And it has close combat to deal with steals and rocks, and in general is a really great mon. And sometimes it can even run Defog in a pinch if I have to bring Volcarona and I'm bringing like Scarf Staraptor or something, and the opponent's hazard setters aren't that great. I can run Defog, and it'll do the job. Especially if I'm trying to pretty much sack off Staraptor, Defog makes for actually not a bad move to have. But at the same time, I still wanted more hazard removal, and being able to spam Dragon type moves was something that I really wanted to have. So I grabbed Latias. Now this also helps. This helps with any speed control issues I might be having at this point, because my draft at this point looks really fast. I have Tapu Koko at base 130. I have a couple of slower mons at 80 and 75 for Dragonite and Mega Scizor respectively, and then Volcarona and Staraptor are both at base 100, and Latias comes in at base 110 to help me out. But spoiler alert, I don't draft another base 100 or higher mon in terms of speed for the rest of the draft. So having Latias here provides for a really great speed control help, as well as something that can be scarfed in a pinch. It can run Healing Wish, Calm Mind. I believe I went over this mon last time for the WWCL, and it didn't end up doing much there, but it also made for something that people had to really prep for. And spamming Dragon type moves is really helpful a lot of the time, especially when I have a Steel type as good as Mega Scizor, because Fairies are pretty much the only thing that get in the way of being chunked by a Draco Meteor. And Draco Meteor is a really powerful move, especially coming from Latias. And in general, it's very useful to have a Draco Meteor spammer, especially one that can run Life Orb, Roost, it can defog. It provides a lot of utility for my team, despite being another dragon. But I wasn't necessarily Ice Weak. I wasn't completely Ice Weak. I had 2 resists, and so it provided for a good mon. But I also was looking for another mon to take advantage of electric terrain specifically. A mon that could help out with resists and make for another good Scarfer. And also this was a fast draft, so I was kind of very rushed at the time. But it also provided me with a way to not be screwed over with Mega Scizor, and that Pokemon is Magnezone. Now, Magnezone, you might be saying, oh, but you already have another Steel type, and you already have another Electric type. But the cool thing about this is Magnezone can trap other Steel types, and not having Mega Scizor trapped by Magnezone on another person's team is huge, because it means I don't have to worry about Mega Scizor being trapped. And I have Magnezone on my own team to trap everybody else's Steel types, which in return helps Mega Scizor a ton. And it helps stuff like Tapu Koko and Dragonite, who have an easier time sweeping with Steel types gone. And so not only does Magnezone benefit from the electric terrain, it's also a good Specs user as a wall breaker. It's a decent Scarf user, not great, but decent. It can run Assault Vest to be bulkier, even though it doesn't have reliable recovery. Honestly, it's just a decent mon in general, and it was value for for the time of the draft that it was. So after that, I realized again that I didn't have a ground type, as oftentimes I do. And I also realized that I had a Ghost Immunity, but I didn't have a Resist. And I wanted to grab Mamoswine at the time because I didn't have an Icemon. nor did I have a water, or well, I had a water Pokemon, but at the time I wasn't really drafting it as a water Pokemon. Um, but Mamoswine, it got sniped before me, and I had a backup plan, and that backup plan was Crocodile. So Crocodile is another Mon that is a great Scarfer. It has Intimidate, it has Moxie, it has a decent move pool. Its speed tier isn't bad at 92, but it's definitely not perfect. Ground Dark is an excellent stab combination, and Knockoff, Pursuit, Earthquake, gets Superpower, Aqua Tail. In general, it is a really nice Mon. It has utility, and I didn't have a Dark type or a Ground type, so it provided me with a couple of types that I didn't already have. And in general, it was really nice. Also, it was another Stealth Rock setter. I don't even think I had a Stealth Rock setter by this point, so having one really made things a lot easier. And then later, I realized I wanted a Mon that would be able to use special water type moves, because again, at the time I was using Gyarados, and I wanted something that could hit really hard from the very beginning, and also a Mon that could use fairy type moves without them being kind of weak, because Tapu Koko's coverage moves can be kind of weak at times. And so I decided to draft Primarina. Now, Primarina is a Mon that now that you see Gyarados gone, looks a lot better. It has a really strong Moonblast, a really strong Hydro Pump, and it is an excellent Specs user because it just takes a chunk out of everything that attempts to switch in. It also has a wide move pool with Ice Beam and Energy Ball and Psychic, and so there's a lot of possible super effective coverage there, as well as possible screens. And screens are nice. But as you can see, is a problem with the draft as I have currently. Not a lot of Mons are as versatile as I usually go for, and that kind of continues throughout the rest of the draft. Not that I like it that way, but a lot of the Mons here I don't mind being that way. And this draft in particular, a lot of the Mons are one-dimensional, but as a whole, as all of them together, they are really hard to prep for. And so that makes it easier on me. So, looking at the current squad, I saw that I didn't have a fighting type. And so I thought of, and I wanted something that was a little bit more physically bulky. I had a couple of Mons that were physically bulky, but they were both weak to fighting. And I had a Mon with Intimidate, but it's weak to fighting. And so I figured I wanted something that wasn't weak to fighting, that was kind of physically bulky, and was a fighting type. And that pretty much fit the bill with Conkeldurr. I thought of Beware at one point or another, and I decided that because I wanted Staraptor at some point, I wanted to. At this point, I kind of figured I would be dropping I'd be dropping Gyarados for Staraptor, but also Conkeldurr provided me with priority again. Mach Punch as priority is huge, considering now with the last few draft picks I've made, they're all pretty slow, and so having extra priority along with Dragonite's E-Speed, Mega Scizor's Bullet Punch, and Staraptor's Quick Attack, fighting type Mach Punch also really helps in the long run, especially coming from something as powerful as Conkeldurr, who can also run Assault Vest, Choice Band, Flame Orb. It has 3 great abilities, and it in general is one of those Mons that you can never quite fully prep for, but always have in the back burner of your mind. So next, I look at my team and I realize I don't have a grass type. What am I doing? And then I look and I see that Roserade is up on there, and I like Roserade. Base 90 speed, base 125 special attack. I already had a decent amount of special attackers here, but Roserade also has good coverage. Leaf Storm, Energy Ball, Sludge Bomb, and Technician helps all the hidden powers be 90 base power. That's really good. And it also gave me something that can be kind of bulky in a couple of situations, especially bulky in particular. It can have spikes, toxic spikes, synthesis. In general, it's a decent mon, and it gives me a little bit of versatility to this very seemingly one-dimensional team. And then last but not least, I wanted a ghost type to be able to spam ghost moves, and Cofagrigus was already sniped before I could get to it. And so one mon in particular that I drafted was Mismagius. And I looked at it, and I thought it was okay, but it was a little lacking in power. And then I looked at the free agency market, and I saw that Chandelure was still left on the free agency market, and I grabbed it immediately because Chandelure has so much power behind it. With Scarf, it still hits really hard, and Subcalm Mind is a fantastic set to run, and it allows me to have a fire type that's not quad weak to rocks, which is also very helpful, as it allows me to break a lot of physically bulky grass types, especially something like Tangrowth. Like, Chandelure is kind of, at this point, it's the last pick in the draft, and it kind of is something that I just need to round out my team. And I feel like Chandelure does that very well. So that's the end of my TDL draft, and as you can see, there are a lot of threats up on that screen. And I'm not completely surprised, considering we had like 3 or 4 meme teams in the league. But it's also not the only really scary roster, so I can't really say that I'm the scariest roster in the league either. But having a lot of these mons, a lot of them I wanted to use on my own because I never got the chance to otherwise. Stuff like Tapu Koko, Staraptor, Primarina, they were all mons that I liked on paper but never got the chance to use, and now that I'm able to use them, I'm very thankful for that opportunity. With that said, let's go to the CBL. Now, the CBL is something that I was brought into by a friend of mine, Silver, who is a co-owner of the league. And at the time, I was replacing a guy that actually had left the league because I was an assistant coach for Silver at the time. So the way this draft happened is it's tiered again, but instead of doing it all in one go, they did it by tier in separate days. So I came here after the OU draft already happened. So basically, what I was given the choice of was the person's previous OU mons. But, well, actually no, because they were skipped. So I was given a choice of the OU mons that were left, that were undrafted, which kind of put me in a spot of, okay, how am I going to plan a draft around these OU mons to make them turn out well? Thankfully, I came up with a good draft plan, and that started out with getting Celesteela. Now, for some strange reason, this thing went undrafted throughout the entirety of the league in OU, and I was praising anything out there for it not being drafted, because it is, as I've described even in this video already, I love all the different things it can do. Choice band, choice specs, freaking, Leech Seed. It learns Leech Seed. It just does everything for a team, and having it there it means that I can build around a steel type without having to build around a single archetype of a steel type, and that is really, really nice. As for my next OU mon, I decided to grab Serperior. This draft also ends up being fairly slow, and so having Serperior as a base 113 speed mon, as well as a mon that's hard to fully prep for in a league format, it's really great. Contrary Leaf Storm, as well as various hidden powers, Dragon Pulse, Giga Drain, and Glare, are pretty much all you need with this thing. It's fairly one-dimensional, but it can also run Subseed. I mean, it's not completely one-dimensional. And even though it is one-dimensional, a Leaf Storm that boosts your special attack +2 because of Contrary is huge, and hidden powers end up being a lot of the coverage you need. So overall, Superior ends up being a really great mon, especially when combined with Pelipper. Now, I could have, in some leagues I could have drafted Pelipper later, specifically because Pelipper currently is UU, but if I wanted it with Drizzle, I had to draft it in OU here. And I felt like that was necessary in order to create a draft that would actually be solidified with undrafted OU mons. Drizzle Pelipper is a really great addition to the Gen 7 meta, especially because it learns Defog, Tailwind, it gets 100% accurate Hurricane, which is a great extra stab to use, which makes even something like Specs Pelipper actually useful. And honestly, it's good support for also being a Drizzle user. And so it's not terrible as a mon on its own. As a whole, if there were a really great Drizzle user, it would probably be banned from OU. But as a whole, Pelipper it has this niche, and I actually get to use Pelipper and not just laugh at it. So that in of itself is pretty great. And I get it because Rain it helps a lot with these two Fire Weak mons, especially with Celesteela, who is bulky and also weak to fire. That allows it to sit there in Rain, provided there's no electric types, which I actually help combat a lot with Superior and various other picks down the line. But Pelipper also gives me a mon that can actually use flying type moves without a Z Crystal. And in this league, you can't have a Mega and a Z Crystal at the same time. And I ended up choosing a Mega, especially because it's really good in Rain. And now that I actually got to draft, my first pick in OU was Mega Swampert. Now, Mega Swampert is a great Rain abuser, because not only does it not need Rain, it doesn't need Rain, but it is really great in Rain. Waterfall hits so hard, and it has excellent coverage in Ice Punch, Superpower, Earthquake, Stone Edge. It has enough to deal with a lot of the mons that would normally check it, and so it makes for a good, solid Rain core. With Pelipper and Mega Swampert, I can just summon Weather whenever I need to. And Weather cores are honestly really a lot better in draft format than they look. And so having one is huge. But one thing that I noticed is I didn't have a Dragon type yet. And I was looking in UU, and I already grabbed Mega Swampert as my first pick, so the other UU Dragons were flying off the board. So I decided to grab the UU Dragon that was left, Haxorus. I love Haxorus too. Haxorus is great. It's another mon that I really wanted to use for a long time because it's such a great Dragon Dancer. It's not the best one out there because there are better Dragon Dancers out there, but that's also why I was able to get it with a second UU pick. But in general, its move pool just does what it needs to do. Superpower, Aqua Tail, Earthquake, moves like that really allow it to get past some Dragon checks. And while base 97 speed tier is not great before a boost, it's great after a boost. And base 147 attack is fantastic after a boost. And it means that I don't always have to run Life Orb either. Sometimes I can run Type Resist Berries or Expert Belt or Lumberry, which is honestly great. But Haxorus gives me this Dragon type that also I don't need to use Dragon Dance with. It can run Swords Dance, it can run Banded, I could run Scarf Haxorus for all I care. Honestly, it's a versatile enough Dragon type to be able to function in and out of Rain, and I really like having Haxorus there for that purpose. And then next, in order to round out really good value in UU, I decided to pick up Mamoswine. Now, Mamoswine doesn't do a whole lot that Mega Swampert that Mega Swampert doesn't do. But what it does do is provide stab ice coverage and priority. And Ice Shard is really great. And it also provides me with a ground type that I don't that's not that's A, not quad weak to grass, and B, that I can decide to use outside of range should I need to. And that's basically a lot of what goes into this draft specifically. I want to be able to use it both in and out of rain, because as much as having a weather core is nice, I don't want it to interfere with my drafting. I want to be able to be versatile in what I'm able to do when I'm putting together teams. So having Mamoswine it's a little bit of roll compression. It's a little bit faster than Mega Swampert. It's not quad weak to grass. It's not another water type. Plus, it's an excellent wall breaker on its own. It doesn't need the extra power from rain. It can run Life Orb. It has Freeze Dry, which is actually really great. Also has stuff like Icicle Crash, Earthquake, Stone Edge. It can run Hidden Powers. But in general, it's a very good mon to have. It's not perfect by any means, but it's a good mon to have. It'd be one of the mons I'd have up on the trade block currently, but at the same time, it would have to be a good offer. That's the thing, and especially with how this team ended up becoming, in terms of typings, I don't think there's a whole lot that I would trade it for in the end. I just like Mamoswine as a mon, and it's served me so well in so many different occasions that it would be hard to give it up as a whole, and I like being able to draft it as the last pick in UU. So the RU draft comes along, and I also need to be able to get some fast mons, but also a little bit of bulk, because a lot of my mons are mediocre speed, without boosts or rain or whatever, but they're also not very, not all of them are bulky anyway. Celesteela is, Pelipper can be, Mega Swampert can be, but in general, I needed a little bit more bulk, but I also needed a little bit more speed, and so realistically, I was kind of back to square one a little bit. But also I had some typings that I still needed to fill, namely Electric, Fairy, Fighting. Some key typings were missing in my first two tiers that I needed to clean up in the next two tiers. So I really needed to hit on a lot of the mons that came in these tiers specifically. So I had priorities, and they were very cut and dry. In RU, I ended up getting all the mons that I wanted, except for one was kind of snipe, but I had a backup and it wasn't that big of a deal. But my first draft pick was a priority in RU, specifically because it's really good in rain, but it also provides me with a good electric type otherwise, and that Pokemon was Heliolisk. Heliolisk has a fantastic move pool. It's a great Scarfer. Base 109 speed is not incredible, but it's good. And in general, it hits pretty hard with base 109 special attack. It has a dual stab and normal electric that's not incredible, but it's also good with the amount of wide move pool it has, such as Surf, Focus Blast, Dark Pulse. In general, it's great in rain because of dry skin, especially. It basically narrows, it allows me to, one, take all water type moves in existence and not care about them whatsoever, and two, it also allows me to be able to recover HP in the rain, and I can fire off thunders in the rain, which both are pretty great boons. And outside of rain, it provides me with a great fast electric type, and that's something that I needed regardless. And so Heliolisk ended up being a good pick, even though I felt kind of weird picking it that early in RU. It didn't come back to bite me, so I was really happy about that. But one thing that I was completely missing was a fairy type. And at first I wanted Gardevoir, but I had Florges in the back, kind of waiting there. And Gardevoir got taken, and so I took Florges. I like the white flower version of Florges. Call me a racist if you want, whatever. I'm Florgist, I guess. But Floor just allows me to have a Calm Minder and a bulky user. It's a wish user, and that means I can pass wishes to a bulky Celesteela, which is a great thing because bulky Celesteela can be worn down kind of quickly. And Floor just still has a little bit of variety to it. It runs bulky most of the time, but it can run stuff like Specs if it wants to. I don't know, Scarf Florges. I could see it. But it has Synthesis outside of Rain, and it has Wish inside of Rain. And that kind of allows it to be a wall either way. Also, Calm Mind, support in general. I think it gets screens. I like Florges as a mon. It's one of my favorite fairy types, and it's always served me well when I needed it. And so it kind of allows me to have a fairy type in general, which I didn't have up to this point, and that completes my Fairy Dragon Steel Core, which it took a lot longer for me to do so than it normally does, but I still got it completed, and fairly well, too. The 3 mons that I got for it are really solid. And then I look at my team, and I'm just like, well, I need a fighting type. And RU was running out of mons quickly, and I was hoping to goodness that this mon wouldn't get drafted, and thankfully it didn't. So I got Heracross. Heracross is another mon that's worked really well for me in the past. If you've watched my IBF video specifically, you know that Scarf Heracross got a decent amount of kills. And I'm planning on using Scarf Heracross a couple of different times throughout this league because I need a Scarfer. Because I don't have a ton of viable Scarfers coming up on the currently on the roster that you see. I have Heliolisk and I have kind of Mamoswine, and so realistically, having another viable Scarfer also allows me to have something that can outspeed some of the fast threats on other people's teams, and Heracross hits hard regardless. I can use Flame Orb, I can use Flame Orb All-Out Attacker, I can use Flame Orb Swords Dance, I can use Moxie Band, Moxie Scarf. Heracross gets a number of good abilities as well as a decent move pool. And in general, it just allows me to have a fighting type. And so, because otherwise this team would struggle a lot with normal types, I feel. Especially something like Miltank or Snorlax that would just sit there in front of the team and just kind of win. So Heracross allows me to not just lose versus teams like that. So I look at the squad, and NU could also be one of those make or break kind of situations. I didn't have a third NU pick in mind. My first thought was Webs, but as you'll see later, I didn't end up getting that. So I just needed to go for my first mon first because I really needed that first mon in my eyes. And as you can see, I don't have a fire type. And if I want to be able to work outside of Rain, I need a fire type to deal with steals and stuff, even that grounds can't deal with. And specifically, Delphox filled that role really nicely. Delphox is one of those mons that, like, it can do a whole lot of stuff without anything being so different from one another that it, like, changes the roles altogether. Delphox, I mean, it can run bulky, I suppose, but its defensive typing is completely awful for it. But in general, it has a lot of offensive versatility in what it can do. It has a good offensive move pool. Fire and Psychic is actually a pretty good offensive typing. But it also has stuff like Dazzling Gleam, Grass Knot. Those two in particular are actually really huge for its move pool because they can pretty much cover what Fire and Psychic don't. It can run Calm Mind, it can run Specs or Scarf, and it has Switcheroo to help with that. And so in general, it ends up being a very good fire type to work outside of Rain, and sometimes inside of Rain too. Obviously, it's not a fire type inside Rain isn't going to be perfect by any means, but I mean, like, it can boost itself. It has a good secondary stab. It can run Specs. So it's not like it's a terrible fire inside of rain. And that is something that I really, really like. But plus, base 104 speed helps tremendously because it's another Mon that's over base 100 speed. And I didn't have nearly enough of those going into NU. I had 2. And that just doesn't suffice for a draft of my drafts. I like my drafts to be pretty fast. Or semi-fast, because I play a very offensive play style. So having Delphox on the squad for base 104 speed, which isn't fantastic, but is good, it's semi-fast, having Delphox there really ends up rounding out my draft a lot better. And it opens up my NU possibilities to a lot of different things. Speaking of that, I wanted to get a Ghost type as my second pick, and then Mismagius went, and Cofagrigus went, and I'm just like, well, let's get the one Pokemon let's get a Dark type for one, because I want to be able to at least spam one of Ghost or Dark, because those are both really good offensive typings, and without one of them, it could be kind of hard to break Psychic types in particular. Heracross can do that with his bug typing, but he's also weak to Psychic, so that doesn't help a whole lot. So I wanted to get something that could break bulky Psychics in particular. And what fell into my lap was Drapion. Now Drapion can do bulky. It can do bulky with Toxic Spikes, even though it really doesn't have any reliable recovery, but that's fine because its stats actually lend itself to a decent bulky set. Toxic Spikes in particular, Toxic, Knockoff, gets rid of people's items, so that has a lot of utility behind it. And in general, Drapion can also run an Assault Vest set, it can run Swords Dance, and it's a Dark type with Knockoff. And not a very strong Knockoff, but a decently strong Knockoff that allows me to have a Dark type in the first place. And having a Poison type to go along with it also allows me to have another thing that can actually kill fairies, because having just Celesteela to kill fairies could be kind of irritating sometimes. And I'm glad I have that option available to me to just use Poison Jab or something. And it helps against grass types too, because inside of rain, grass types could be a real big hassle. Mamoswine could help, but we don't have special attacking Delphox here. Sometimes Heracross isn't going to be able to deal with that. And Drapion, again, it rounds out my squad very nicely. Again, it's not a perfect Mon, but it also it gives me enough of a Mon for NU. It gives me enough utility for it to be definitely a good pick in my eyes. And then for the last pick, I wanted to go with Webs, but Shuckle was already taken. Galvantula was taken in RU. And so it came down to me just wondering, okay, do I take, like, Leaveney or something for Webs? And I'm just like, well, probably not, no. That's just a waste of a roster slot just for Webs, and it's a waste of a team slot. It basically makes it 5-6 from the start. And so I'd rather just get a good, solid value draft pick and, like, possibly trade it later. And that pick ended up being Tauros. But I don't want to trade Tauros, because Tauros sheer force boosted attacks from 110 base attack coming from 110 base speed is great. I might already have a normal type, but Tauros is not only physical, but it also has a completely different set of wide move pool types. It has Zen Headbutt, Stone Edge, Earthquake, Body Slam, Rock Climb if I need the power, Iron Head, and it has a lot of sheer force boosted stuff, and it hits that 110 speed tier that Heliolisk does not. And so I can speed tie with a lot of fast stuff that Heliolisk just can't do. And so Tauros ends up being one of those mons that, like, even though it's just such a niche, it's just such a small niche over Heliolisk, it actually becomes a bigger niche than it looks. And it ends up being another fast mon, especially being able to hit 110 is huge, because that means I have two Pokemon that hit 110 or higher, which is a lot better than one. Especially when accompanied by two other Pokemon that hit over base 100, and two Pokemon that hit 95 or higher. And so it allows my team to not be super quick, but allows it to be kind of quick outside of rain. And that's what I really like about Tauros. It makes the draft not look as slow. And that I really appreciate. So that's my draft in the CBL. At first I didn't like it very much, but once I started building with it in particular, it really started to stick with me. And now I don't know. And now that free agency has just started in week 2, because I've already done my week 1 match, I'm not sure if I want to trade anything out. I think this roster is pretty good. So with that, I have my WBC squad, my TDL squad, and my CBL squad. Us, the El Paso Enteis, will be uploading the battles from the TDL and the WBC, and whatever I can from the CBL. It's both Showdown and on cart, so I'm not going to be able to upload everything. But I can fill you guys in on what goes on in the battles that I can't show. But in general, that has been the El Paso Enteis draft video for 3 different drafts. As you can see, I'm a very big draft league fanatic. I tend to do well, I guess. But hey, I'm not perfect. I'm improving. But in general, being able to be in all these drafts allows me to just have fun and do what I need to do. So thank you all for watching. And cheer on the El Paso Enteis. Hashtag El Paso Enteis in the comments if you're watching this. And thank you guys for watching. Peace.